The sun was sinking behind the abandoned warehouses, bleeding orange light through broken windows. A quiet wind stirred the dust, carrying the faint smell of oil and rust. The police cars stood in a rough semicircle, their red and blue lights flickering against the crumbling walls. Officers moved cautiously, murmuring into radios, their boots crunching over gravel. And among them, half hidden behind the thick weeds near the road, stood the boy. His skin was dark, his clothes torn and too large, his eyes fixed on the warehouse as though it held something only he could see. He didn't speak. Not one word had escaped his lips since the patrol found him wandering alone near the river that morning. At first, they thought he was lost, another orphan from the outskirts. But then he began tugging at one officer's sleeve, pointing with quick, trembling motions toward the warehouse. When they brought him here, he had fallen completely silent again. Still, there was something in his stare, a mixture of fear and certainty, that made the chief hesitate to dismiss him. The dog beside one of the officers growled low, sensing tension in the air. The boy's gaze flicked toward it. Slowly, cautiously, he crouched down, meeting the dog's eyes. For a long moment, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. Then the boy pressed his small hand to the ground. 2 fingers, deliberate and slow, tracing something invisible in the dirt. A shape, a direction. The dog's ears perked, body tensing. The handler frowned. "What's he doing?" another officer muttered. But before anyone could stop him, the boy raised his head and pointed, just once, toward a section of the warehouse where the wall looked blackened by smoke. It was a gesture so calm, yet so heavy, it sent a chill through every man standing there. The handler tightened his grip on the leash. The dog let out a sharp bark, tail stiff, nose twitching. The boy didn't flinch. He stood motionless, eyes wide, as if the slightest sound would break something fragile in the air. One officer moved forward, glancing back at the boy for confirmation. The child's lips parted. No sound came out, only a silent breath that trembled in the fading light. The wind picked up, lifting dust and old paper through the air, and for a moment everyone froze between belief and disbelief. The chief finally gave the signal. "Send the dog in." As the animal lunged forward toward the dark entrance, the boy's hand dropped to his chest, just over his heart, as if holding something unseen inside him. No one noticed the tear that slipped down his cheek, or how his fingers shook slightly as he clutched the edge of his shirt. He had done his part. Now it was up to them to find what his silence had tried so desperately to tell. The dog rushed through the cracked doorway, barking sharply as the officers followed with flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of oil, wet metal, and something else, something foul that made every breath taste wrong. The beams of light trembled against the walls, revealing rusted barrels, torn tarps, and piles of forgotten machinery. The echo of the dog's claws on the concrete sent shivers down the men's spines. Every sound felt amplified. Their own heartbeats, the click of safety switches, the low growl of the animal that suddenly turned into a whimper. "Easy, Rex, easy," the handler whispered, his voice cracking. The dog stopped near a large stack of bent metal sheets leaning against the back wall. Its nose pressed to the ground, tail stiff, it began to scratch. Frantic, desperate, the officers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them knelt, grabbed the edge of a sheet and pulled. The metallic clang echoed like thunder in the hollow space. Another officer joined in, dragging away piece after piece until something pale and trembling came into view. A small hand. Then another. "Jesus!" Someone breathed out, his voice trembling. Behind the metal lay 3 children, bound with rope, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. Their eyes were wide, blinking rapidly against the sudden light. One of them started to cry the moment she saw the uniforms, muffled by the gag across her mouth. The handler dropped to his knees, knife in hand, cutting through the bindings as the others covered the exits, guns drawn. The youngest boy clung to the handler's arm the moment he was freed, trembling violently, whispering something inaudible between sobs. "They're alive," the chief exhaled, his voice breaking with disbelief. "My God." "They're alive." The officers stood frozen for a moment, realizing they had stumbled upon something far darker than any of them had expected. The warehouse wasn't just abandoned, it was a prison. Old stains marked the floor, chains clinked softly against the wall, and a single lantern hung from a beam, still warm, suggesting someone had been there moments before. "Where's the boy who led us here?" one of the officers asked suddenly, glancing toward the door. The others followed his gaze, half expecting to see him standing in the doorway. But he wasn't there. Only the faint echo of his earlier silence remained, the memory of that small, steady hand pointing them toward this horror. The handler lifted one of the rescued girls into his arms. Her tiny fingers clutched his collar, and through broken sobs she whispered, "He told us you'd come. The quiet boy. He said the dog would understand." The words hit the room like a second shockwave. The men looked at each other, hearts pounding. The dog, still panting, turned toward the open door and barked once, short, sharp, and almost mournful. It was as if it knew what the humans hadn't yet realized, that the child outside had sacrificed far more than his voice to make this moment possible. The officers hurried outside, the rescued children wrapped in blankets clinging tightly to the ones carrying them. The night had deepened. Only the dim glow of the patrol lights painted the cracked road red and blue. The boy was standing exactly where they had left him, motionless, his small silhouette trembling under the chill wind. His eyes were fixed on the warehouse, unblinking, like he could still see the shadows moving inside. When the chief approached him, the boy didn't move. Only when the police dog trotted toward him, panting softly, did his gaze finally shift. The dog stopped in front of him, sniffed his hand, then pressed its head gently against the boy's leg. That was when something inside him broke. His knees gave out and he sank to the ground, his thin shoulders shaking, his breath catching in silent sobs. The handler knelt beside him, unsure whether to speak or not, and then simply rested a hand on the boy's back. "You did good, kid," he whispered. "You saved them." From behind them came the faint sound of a child's voice, the rescued girl, the smallest of the three. She had spotted him and suddenly wriggled free from the blanket, stumbling toward him. "It's him," she cried, her little voice trembling. "He was with us. He helped us escape." Everyone froze. The boy's eyes widened, tears glistening on his cheeks. The girl stopped a few steps away, clutching the edge of her blanket, her lip quivering. "He didn't run when the bad man came. He stayed." The air grew heavy. The officers exchanged looks, realization dawning painfully slow. The chief crouched before the boy, his voice gentler now. "You knew where they were all along, didn't you?" The boy lowered his head. He didn't need to answer. His silence spoke louder than words ever could. The scars across his wrists, faint but visible in the flashing light, told the rest of the story. The same ropes, the same marks as those on the rescued children. He had once been one of them. A heavy stillness fell. Even the night wind seemed to pause. The handler's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "He couldn't tell us, because they took his voice." The chief swallowed hard, turning away for a moment to compose himself. The dog, sensing the emotion, pressed closer to the boy, resting its head on his lap. The boy's trembling fingers brushed over the animal's fur, and for the first time, his breathing steadied. The rescued children were watching quietly now, huddled together. When one of them softly said, "Thank you," the boy lifted his gaze. His lips parted, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Instead, he smiled, a fragile, broken smile that carried more weight than any speech could. The handler reached out, gripping his shoulder firmly, and whispered, "You don't need to speak. You already said everything." The dog barked once, short, proud, echoing into the cold night. The sound rippled through the silent officers, breaking their stillness. And as the first rays of dawn touched the edges of the sky, the boy turned toward the light, eyes filled with something new, something that almost looked like peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone.